I bought a company every 6 weeks for 20 years.
Hey everyone, I'm back. It's Sam with Moneywise. Today's episode is extra special because it's with the first billionaire who's ever been on the show. Now look, billionaires, they're very secretive, and there's not that many of them. I don't know if there's ever been one who's willingly revealed all of their finances, but we have it. That's what we have today. Now, we talk a lot about selling your business on the show. That's how a lot of people make a lot of money. Because building a business and selling it for tens of millions of dollars, that's awesome. It opens up an entirely new lifestyle, an entirely new set of opportunity. But in today's episode, we have Oscar, and his story is what happens when you don't sell. It's when you keep focusing on growth decade after decade.
What's the valuation today, roughly?
A little over 50 billion.
In this episode, Oscar is going to tell us how he became a billionaire and how his life has changed along the way, including why his closet is still mostly full of $15 t-shirts. We're going to hear how he became a billionaire without sacrificing his personal values, and how he always puts his family first, and how he's passing on a nearly unimaginable amount of wealth. Now, before we get into everything, I want to give a quick shout out to Andrew Namami. Andrew has a podcast called Permission to Shine, and we asked him to go and find a billionaire to interview for this episode of Moneywise. And if this is your first time listening to Moneywise, here's the gist. You see, Instagram is full of quick hits and all that stuff on how to get rich. But there's not a lot of information out there on how to handle life after you've already made a bunch of money. But I'm able to see a lot of these conversations, and I'm able to see that because I own a company called Hampton. It's joinhampton.com. It's a community for CEOs, business owners, things like that. And because of that, I'm able to see all these conversations that happen among high net worth people. I'm able to see all the conversations that typically happen behind closed doors. I can see all that. And I thought, I think a lot of these need to be made public. Hence this podcast, Moneywise. And so on Moneywise, we talk to real people who have made a lot of money, and we figure out how it changed their lives. And also, along the way, they're brutally honest about their finances, their expenses, their monthly spend, things like that. And more importantly, all the personal challenges that come with success and how they've managed them. And so if you're a CEO, if you're a startup founder, if you're a business owner, go ahead, check out my company, joinhampton.com. You're going to be able to connect with a ton of other successful people just like you. So today's guest, Oscar, his business is worth about $50 billion. However, how much of that does he actually own?
6-7% of it.
So that shakes. What's the math on that?
Oh, that's a lot. It's over 3 billion.
And like we teased in the beginning, you wouldn't really guessed it based on his wardrobe.
I buy my shirts at home at Men's Warehouse or Academy. I go in there and I see shirts at $14, $15, $20, and I go, that's good for me. I'll take 4 or 5 of them. People don't recognize me as being wealthy.
It's got to be nice.
I tell you what, when I was growing up in Arkansas, me and my dad went into Bentonville, Arkansas, and this was back in the 60s. And I met Sam Walton, and he come out of a shoe store, and he had an old pickup there, and hay in the back of it, and he had his dog in the back of it. And he walked out, and my dad told him hi, because he wasn't big at that time. He was just starting to grow. And Dad had been to his store and said, hey, how you doing, Sam? He said, good. And he sat there and talked. Dad talked to him for a while. He took off, and Dad says, man, that guy's he's got a bunch of stores now. He's doing really good. But you'd have never knew that back then he had an airplane, a Piper Cub or something. He flew to Missouri, to all the places. He said, you never knew who Sam Walton was. You wouldn't knew. He was wealthy then, before he went public. But he just said you'd never recognize it because he had hay on his bottom of his shoes and an old dog in the back of his truck. And I remembered that, and I was only like 13, 14 years old, and I remember that guy's wealthy. And Dad says, oh, well, he's pretty wealthy. So I thought, you know what, if I ever get wealthy, I don't want to change. I want people to look at me like, okay, you're just a regular guy. And
that's a really powerful story.
Yeah.
And it's why you went to Cracker Barrel this morning with your grandson.
That's right. Went to Cracker Barrel this morning for breakfast.
However, I wouldn't exactly call Oscar a regular guy.
What do your biggest expenses look like?
Just running. We have a home in Florida, and we have one up here in the middle of the United States. It's a ranch, and so probably my big expenses is keeping the ranch going because I've got hundreds and hundreds of cars, and I got a lot of cattle. So between the cattle and the mechanics and everybody keeps all my cars going, and on the ranch, that's probably the biggest expense we have.
What did that ranch cost to buy?
Paid $28 million and put probably another $15 million in it. But I had big buildings to put my cars in.
It's beautiful. You have two massive garages. How big is each garage?
One's 2 acres and one's 1 acre.
What is that in square feet?
Probably 150,000 square feet.
Okay. And you have how many cars?
300.
300 cars.
Yeah.
They're beautiful.
They're all old cars and hot rods.
Collectibles. So like Chevys, right? Your big 1955 guy.
Most of them are American made. Well, most of them are American made, and of course you go to the exotic building and it's got the Ferraris and the Porsches and the Lamborghinis and stuff like that.
And then you have a house in Florida. Do you remember what you purchased that for?
Yeah, we get $15 million for it.
How big is it?
It's 22,000 square feet on the ocean.
Okay. What other major expenses?
We got a family jet. It's pretty expensive. It's $49 million. So it's a pretty good chunk of change for it. But I let my kids use it all the time, and we use it all the time. And
Can you tell us what it takes to be able to fly private like that?
well, on that, you don't have to start off with a Global. A Global's like $15,000 an hour. So, but you can buy a smaller jet, used jet, smaller jet for a couple $1,000s an hour. But then you got to hire pilots because you can't fly them, and most jets take 2 of them. But you're flying a 15, 20-year-old jet, which they're all okay, nothing wrong with them. But we got a big family, so I got a big plane. So it's really how much you want to spend. But it's hard to get any private plane for less than $2,000 an hour. It might be the way it is today with cost of fuel. I could be off by $1,000 or $1,500 an hour. So flying private's not cheap.
It's really not.
And if you got a company, so it makes enough money, you can write it off and depreciate it. It's great, but I'm private. I can't depreciate it and I can't write it off. So it's just a dead expense.
It's just straight out of the bank account.
Just like having a cow or a horse.
Wait, so $49 million. Do you write a check for that?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, you just sell a little bit of stock and you write a check for it.
There's some really big line items in Oscar's personal expenses, including the amount of money his wife spends and what he gives to his family. We're also going to do a portfolio breakdown in a second, which is actually amazingly surprising given how much he's worth, and he's actually willing to do that. But before we get to that, let's back up a bit. How the hell did Oscar get to a point in his life where writing a $49 million check is no big deal? We have to start by understanding the key values in Oscar's life. These are values that he has never deviated from and have been critical to his success.
I put God first, then I put the family, and then I put the company.
Team members, investors, partners, they all have the potential to come and go. And let's face it, they all have their best interests in mind first. But family, in most cases, if you do have the same for them, they will always be there, decade in, decade out. Oscar's entire foundation is built around that value. And it's something he learned to do while he was young.
My dad couldn't read or write, but there was 8 of us kids, so he never worked for somebody my whole life. He could start a business with the drop of a hat. So growing up, Dad would build a company as long as us kids could work in it. When it got bigger than us kids could run it in him, he'd auction it off and start something else. So growing up, we was in the dairy business, the chicken egg business, we was in the underground dirt business, we was in the concrete business and block lane business and demolition of buildings business. We was in all snow moving business, milking cows. We was in a lot of lumber yards. So about every year we got different training because he'd auction it off and start something else.
And what did your mom do?
She kept the books. She took care of all those kids, and she always kept the books because, like I said, Dad couldn't read. He'd come in and bring the newspaper in, and she'd read all the want ads, different ads, sales ads, and she'd read them to him. He said, well, okay, I can make some money doing that. And he'd get in the paper, and he'd buy it. He bought a big wrecking yard up in Northern California once, and we went up there and counted all the cars, and it had to be scrapped out because he was putting a highway through there. He bought it and had to be gone. And he crushed all the cars and hauled them all off to the scrap iron. And then there was a big building down in Woodland, California that the county wanted down, so he bid on it. And we went over there with big old tractors and cranes and tore it all down and hauled it all to the dump. So it's just whenever he could find in the paper that he could make money at up in Lake Tahoe. They always had a lot of snow problems, so he bought some snow plows and started plowing off all the parking lots for the hotels and stuff. And he just, whenever he sees he could make a dime, he figured it out.
Oscar, like his father, leans on his partner for support. And to him, this is one of the most important factors in his success.
I got a wife that backs me. It doesn't matter if it's a woman, a man, or a woman. The mate you pick out has to go with you. Because if you think you're going to do something and your mate's against you or doesn't work with you, then it's tough on the marriage, tough on your feelings. You're always afraid to say something to your. I'm not afraid to say nothing to my wife, and she ain't afraid to tell me nothing either. But she believes in whatever I believe in.
The ultimate partnership.
Because I don't say a little bit. I might tell her something I'm going to do. It might take me 3 hours to explain it, but I explain every little bit of it to her. And then she gives me her comments. But so we don't run it as I make the money and you just can spend it. No.
You said that when you met your spouse, you were 20 years old.
I was 20 and she was 19. Yeah, I just got back from Nam.
And you told her that you were going to be wealthy someday.
Well, yeah, I did like young guys always say, brag. I just told her, I said, of course, I'm driving my mom's Oldsmobile when I tell her.
I mean, you were poor, right? You guys were.
Yeah. My first job was working for Safeway as $1.10, $1.15 an hour. But that was a long time ago. Your stamps were only 3 cents, bread was 29 cents. So,
Nam. You just heard him say it. Yes, Oscar is old enough to have served in Vietnam. And it was an experience that we can't brush over when talking about his life. Something like that will shape your life forever.
I didn't go there. It came and got me. I got drafted.
You ended up getting a Purple Heart.
Yeah, I was trained in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and my outfit got chipped out, and they held me back to be a forward observer for mortars. And then I was shipped into a company called the 1st to 16th Rangers outfit in the first Big Red One. So I was attached to them. And then I was a FDC. I was a Fire Directional Center calling in mortars. It was out in the field because mortars goes with you in the field. And then our FO got killed. And so they said, you got promoted because I knew how to read a map and stuff. You got promoted to an FO. And I thought, well, I don't think I like to be an FO because a FO is a forward observer. You and your radio guy goes ahead of the whole company, but you call in artillery. You call in the mortars. So anyway, I served half the time as FDC and another half the time as FO.
Thank you for your service. Yeah. That was a pretty important time in American history. What do you think that gave you? Like, what do you take away from that experience?
Well, the military taught me a lot of stuff because I was kind of, got away from the house and I was just a young guy and I was just chasing girls and having a hot rod and working hard, and that's what it was. But when I got in there, I learned a chain of command, being clean, a coat of paint means a lot, being organized, all that, and then being a team player. When I first got into basic training in Fort Ord, California, they take you down, shape all your hair off your head, and take you down and get all your fatigues and everything, and then you line up, and with a DI comes out and hollers at you. And I found out real quick, if you do what he says, you can be a team leader. So I worked real hard to be a team leader, and I got to be a team leader. So instead of having to do KP and everything else, I got to be a squad leader to be over the squad. And that means you get out of a lot of work, but you got to be a leader. And I was always used to being that with my dad. So I learned that. And I think when I went to AIT in Fort Polk, Louisiana, that's what they held me back for more training. So it kind of, it just gives me discipline, but I carried that through my company. From when I first started my company, our company, everything we have is all lined up. Everything that we have is always repainted every so many years. Everything's really clean, organized, because the employees got to work there 8 hours a day, every day. So you want to keep everything really nice for them. And the chain of command meant a really lot, and I made the company follow a chain of command. So the military taught me a lot.
So let's talk about building that company. Like I said at the beginning, Oscar has never sold. He started a company and he's still with it today. Instead of selling and starting something new every 10 years or so, he's been locked in on growth, which has been an exponential journey. But before we go any further, learning about how he did what he did, I want to address something. There are many reasons to become an entrepreneur. You may just want to get rich to support the lifestyle you want. You may want to be someone who doesn't have to report to anyone, or you'd prefer to be your own boss, or maybe you're just someone who gets caught up in the passion of building things. The point is, just because Oscar built a company and because he stuck with it and because it worked out for him, it doesn't mean that that will suit your purpose, even if your goal is money. That said, it made him a multi-billionaire. So maybe that will sway you. But to learn how he did it and how the path has impacted his life, we first have to understand why. And we'll get to that in just a moment.
I don't think it was motivation for money. It was motivation to have a successful business because, like I said, my dad was in all kinds of businesses. When I got out, I wanted to be in the business that I'm in. And I could see that there was not a lot of competition in it. Well, not a lot. There was a lot of competition, but there wasn't nobody doing it right. So I thought, okay, how do I get into this, in the commerce business? So as I got in the commerce business, I seen, okay, they're doing it. It's all mom and pop, and they're all not putting their money back in the company, and they're not making it good, and they're not investing in technology. So I decided, okay, I'm going to change the industry. And I've changed the industry a lot. I made a lot of major changes that my competitor said, you're stupid for doing it, but I did it and it worked out. There was not very many downs. We had a lot of upside, but my first location that I bought, it was 5 acres. Me and my wife went around all four corners, and we prayed on all four corners and dedicated to the Lord. And from then on, going to the 12th grade and not going to college for nothing and learning accounting on my own, I bought a company every 6 weeks for 20 years. So I grew the company across the nation. And when I did that, every one of them deals I made, usually when the mom and pop wanted to sell out, they usually call me because I call all my competitors once a month and say, hey, you guys ready to sell? They'd say no, and then I'd tell them that I'm interested in buying if they ever change their mind. And I'd get a phone call. I'd get a phone call one day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I said, I'll be there in the morning. So I'd get a red eye, and I'd fly out, and I'd be there to have breakfast with the guy in the morning. And we'd sit down at a table with a yellow pad, and we'd make a deal out. How much you want, how much rent you want, how do you want cash, or you want stock, or do you want this or that? And we'd draw it all out, and I said, I'll have the lawyers send copies to you tomorrow. And I would leave, and I'd go back and have dinner, and maybe with them, and I'd pray about it that night. And if they changed the deal the next day, I'd just get up and walk out and say, I don't want to do the deal. I don't know if it was good or bad, but I asked for guidance, and I got the guidance, so I just left. And well, there's one that I didn't do and I should have done, and I never got the permits. And we've had that land. I've had that land for close to 25 years now, and we just got permits 25 years later because I've never sold land. Once I buy land, I keep it. So we just kept it, and it stayed mothballed, but 25 years later, we got permits for it. So now it's worth 20 times more than what I paid for it.
That's fascinating. How far into starting the company did you realize that it was going to be massive and generation changing?
I didn't know. I had like 5 locations, and I was happy in the town I was in, and I was growing. And another competitor in the same state but a larger city, he had took his company public. And I didn't know what public meant because I didn't watch the sports page, and I didn't watch the stock pages. I didn't know what it was. Just a bunch of numbers didn't mean nothing to me. But I got his hand. I said he went public, and he raised, I don't know what he raised, $10 million. And $10 million was a lot of money back then. And I thought, okay, well, how did he do it? So I got a prospectus, and I read it. And my son-in-law was not my son-in-law then. He was hanging out with me. He was only 19. And I read the prospectus, and I said, hey, I don't see in this prospectus nowhere you got to pay this money back. And he says, what do you mean? I said, I've read the whole thing twice. Once you do an offering, you don't have to pay it back. They just own part of your company, but you don't have to pay it back. And he says, really? And I said, I think I'm going to do that. So I called a lawyer when I got back, and he told me what he could do. And I went into the library and got a little book that Ernst & Young put out. Maybe the book was probably 4 inches wide, 6 inches tall, about 30 pages deep, and it says how to go public, IPO. So I read it, and then I found a lawyer that could help me out, and one in San Francisco. And he says, well, investment banker. He said, you need an investment banker. So I found an investment banker that was interested in doing it. He says, I don't know if you make enough money to do it because you own all these other types of companies. And he said, but I'll raise you $10 million alone. And if you can invest that and show what you can do, then hit these numbers, then we probably can take it public. And I go, okay. But the deal was I had to sell off all my other companies other than this one type of company that I had. And I had other companies that was part of it, but wasn't it. I said, you got to sell all them off and concentrate on this one.
Double down and focus.
Yep. So I did. I sold them all off. And when I sold them off for like $15 million. So I was rich and didn't know it. I was only going to get a $10 million loan.
How old were you at that time?
Probably 27, 28, something like that.
You got $15 million at 27.
Yeah, well, I'd sold off all the other companies. And I just put and dumping my money in these other companies that I didn't know I was rich because I just added another location, another something else. And
you were just focused on building.
I was focused on building it. And I went to Detroit and bought a whole bunch of stuff after Iacocca had shut down the plants. I went to Taiwan and shipped in a bunch of stuff when they were making aftermarket stuff. And I was selling all that stuff. But anyway, I sold it off. I had a lot of cash. It wasn't ideal about the cash. It was ideal I needed the investment bankers, their knowledge, how to take a company public, because I knew nothing about that. So although I had the cash, I still took their $10 million and I grew it, but I had to go public within 5 years or they owned 26% of my company. At that time, I was 74% ownership in it, but when I went public, I dropped down because I had to give a lot of stock out to go public. So I was like, I think it was like, time it was all said and done, I was like 50% ownership in the company, 40-some%.
Once Oscar had figured out how to make the public offerings work for him, he utilized them as a way to keep funneling cash into the company to maximize his growth potential.
I did about 4 offerings. I went back when I wanted to raise some more money to do more acquisitions and sold more stock to get more cash to grow the company, and I did that.
You just kept betting on yourself?
Kept betting on everything that I was doing because I was making a cookie cutter across the nation.
When growing a company, planning and long-term goals are a must. So there's all this advice out there on how you should have this grand vision and you should want to make the world a better place. And don't get me wrong, I think that stuff's great and it's important and it could totally work for you. But isn't it kind of crazy hearing Oscar's story where he basically was just kind of feeling it out and winging things along the way? Now, a lot of people, they're not going to give you the advice to wing it, but I kind of like it. I kind of like just feeling the vibe out and seeing where things are going to go. And it's kind of cool to hear that it worked so well for Oscar that it made him a billionaire. It's incredibly fascinating to hear. And I will say this, I think that there's something about following your gut. Oscar did a ton of that, and he followed his gut even in situations where most people would have backed down.
Some of the bankers looked down and said, "You got no education?" I go, "No." They'd ask me dumb questions, and me not knowing them, I said, "Well, that was a dumb question." And they look at me dumb, I go, "I don't know where you got that question, but that can't even happen in our industry." And I go, and it was dumb. They were taught in college to ask these certain questions. When it asked me, of course, the guy that took our competitor public, he was educated and everything, and he answered them that way. I just didn't put up with it. I said, "Well, that's just stupid. It can't happen that way." And I walked out on some investment bankers. They got asking stupid things, or they asked me about my competitor. I said, "I didn't come in here to talk about my competitor. Read about them, do what you want. This is me." And a couple of them, I just said, "You know what? I'm done." I just got up and walked out. And the bankers that was on my side, he said, "You can't do that. You can't get out and walk out on them. They're the ones wanting to buy your stock." Well, I don't want them to be shareholders. I only want shareholders that want to believe in me and my dream.
So did you ever feel like an underdog?
No, I never did.
Were you really confident? Like when you're walking in these investment banker meetings, a lot of times like I'll have imposter syndrome, right? Like you're sitting with somebody and you're like, "Man, am I worthy to be in this conversation?" Did you ever have that, or were you always filled with a lot of confidence?
I'm kind of person that's always in command. I'm always in control of what I do. So I never had that. Education never meant nothing to me that much. I mean, I was taught to respect my teachers and everybody taught me, but I was never the impression that this is one thing my mom taught me. Nobody's better than you, and you're no better than anybody else.
Amen.
And that's the way that I looked at it. It's just, you're not better. I don't care how smart you are. You're not better than me, but I'm not better than you. We're just all humans. And it goes down to the guys taking care of washing the floors, sweeping the floors. When I go visit, we call it an executive drop-in. And our executives are supposed to drop into our locations. They're supposed to go in and talk to the guy sweeping the floor, cleaning the bathrooms, doing everything just as much as you do with the managers. You go and tell them how much you love them, how much you appreciate working for the company, and ask for their problems, because some of them have problems, and they feel comfortable if they can talk to the top executives of the company, knowing that they care for them. And we have a really good company. It's really tight. We don't lose very many employees. Most of them stay with us. I just talked to 2 today. One retired after 29 years, and another one retired after 20 years. And they've been with me for a long time, and they just love the company.
Still, Oscar didn't just feel his way through, and he didn't just have everything work out for him. To grow a business as aggressively as he was, he had to make a lot of sacrifices in his life.
I come home one day, I bought a house on a GI Bill in California, and I come into my wife and I said, I found a little company I want to buy. And she said, yeah. And I said, we got to sell the house. She said, sell the house? I said, I'm selling the house, and there's a little trailer out there. We're gonna live in a trailer that was 10 foot wide by 32 feet long on the property. And we had 3 kids. And she says, we are? And I go, yeah, I can buy it, but I need the money from the house sale. So we sold the house and moved in a little camp trailer, a little trailer like that out at the location. And then I worked to 10 o'clock at night every night until the company got on its feet. And then we sold it, moved into a double wide, and then sold it later and moved into another home. And then I sold her house again to enlarge the company to go public. But she's never complained about it. She knew if we gave up stuff to get something else. And I pushed the company to the limit. Sometimes in the early days, we would have some good sales at noon. I said, you got to take this deposit to the bank, because I wrote a bunch of checks for other stuff. So she'd go to the bank and deposit it. We might make deposits twice a day. Because I said, got to get that money in there, because I wrote checks for more product coming in. So did we give up a lot? I don't know that we gave up a lot, but we risked a lot. We didn't have a problem risking what we had to see the outcome of something else. And I got a lot of friends that their wives would never let them do that. They got a really good paying job, and they'd come up with a good idea, and the wife says, you're not giving up that high paying job to risk what we have for your dream. That's a lot. There's a whole lot of that out there. Guys that's really built a good company are doing it, and they want to gamble again, and the security of the big paychecks was a security blanket that hurt them. And I'm a firm believer in it. I pay all my execs a lot of money. I give them a lot of stock options. Hopefully they won't leave and go start a company against me or another company. I want them to stay with me. So as long as I'm paying them a lot and they got good benefits and they got good options, they go home and they tell their wives, well, I think I'm going to quit this company and go start my own dream. And she's, my ass you are. You ain't giving them that big paycheck and that stock options. And that's what happens. And I'm no different than anybody else. I don't want people to leave. So I want to pay them a lot, take care of them a lot, make sure they got to think twice before they leave.
Golden handcuffs.
Golden handcuffs. And I don't want them to leave. But some has left, and they failed, and they came back 5 years later, said, hey, it didn't work. Can I have my job back? I go, sure. I didn't hold no grudge. More power to you. When I shook their hand and said, good luck to you, because they helped build a company. They're good people. They just have a dream. And if a dream worked out, good for them. If a dream didn't work out, it didn't mean I didn't like them. They did a good job when they were with me. The second time they came back, they stayed. The wife wouldn't let them do it twice.
Now, we've mentioned his wife a few times now. She's supported him throughout the entire journey, and realistically, they've been a team. As we've said, having that support, it's been incredibly important to his success. This is where we can take away some amazing value from Oscar's story. You'll probably never be successful by yourself or all alone. And if you act like you can or will be, you're going to lose a lot of the support that's imperative to your growth. Oscar recognizes and respects his wife. They are a team, and he treats her as such.
Me and my wife, we've been married 57 years now. So
Congratulations.
She ran some of our locations for a while. And then our kids got older, and our kids, being young, 2 daughters and a son, and they ran locations for a while. And then when my wife finally got grandkids, she didn't want to run no locations, and she just wanted to go home and be with the grandkids, which was really great. But I would come home at night, and we'd lay in bed, and I'd tell her everything that's happening, and she'd give me her opinion. And I would take her opinion because she had a really good opinion about what it was.
That also means he respects her right to spend their money.
Does she ask you when she wants to buy something big? Will she come to you?
I don't ask her when I go buy cars, and she don't ask me. She just goes and does it. But she never buys nothing.
Yeah, what's like the biggest thing that she's ever bought?
Oh, some diamonds and pearls and stuff like that. When she's with
Babs?
What do those cost? Do you have any idea?
this has been up to. She got some $600,000-$700,000 jewelry, and she's with.
Babs?
So wait, if you see $600,000 hit the credit card, do you blink?
Nah,
Oh,
that's because I can go out to an auction and spend a couple million. So She don't say nothing.
Like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Yes. You guys don't have any sort of like, hey, call each other before you make a big expense?
No. I get a text on my phone that I see what she's spending, but it doesn't bother me. I don't make sure her credit card doesn't get hacked. So anytime she spends money, it texts me, and I know, okay, she's over there buying furniture.
And you said the biggest thing that she buys is what?
The biggest thing she buys is usually jewelry.
Jewelry.
She'll buy some furniture, but furniture don't add up to a jewelry cost.
What's the jewelry cost?
Well, most of her jewelry is under 50 grand, but sometimes she'll buy, $500,000 in jewelry, but that's just what she does. I mean, and she buys some of it for kids. For our kids are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, so sometimes she's just buying jewelry for her granddaughters or something for gifts.
You guys are very family oriented.
Real family oriented, yeah.
Where do you think that came from, and why is that so important to you?
Well, when you're raised with I was raised with, there's 8 of us siblings, and there's 4 in hers. And we've been married so long that her sisters and brothers run around with my sisters and brothers because we've been married so long. I think it's just both sides. We were both Christian families, and we got together. Her mom and dad, my mom and dad got along real good, and I always had a lot of family work for me, and so we just picked. And her family worked for me too. And years ago, when we went to get our first location, I borrowed some money off of her relatives and mine, and they all gave me money, short-term loan, 6-month loan, year loan, and got us started. So after we got started and the company got going, we issued stock to them. So they're all mega rich too. So when the stock was cheap, we did these family grats, that Walton came up, the Walton grats, and we loaned stock into the grat. And then after 2 years, we got back the valuation of that stock, but what was over, they got the upside. So they're all worth tens of millions of dollars too.
They've got to love you.
So when you got sisters and brothers, if you can give it to them while they're alive and they get to buy new homes and cars and everything, then you get to see it while you're alive. Wait until you die to give it, that's not no good. If you got money, you need to help them all out. And of course, that teaches them, if we give to them, they let it roll down here and they give to their kids. And they help their kids get into business. So it's more of a pay it forward type deal. We give it to them, they give it to their kids. Most all of it is in stock. So the longer they keep the stock, the more wealthy they get. Some are spendthrifts and they spend it as fast as they get it. And some don't, but we don't really care. Once we give it, we don't care just as long as they're not buying drugs or alcohol, then we don't really care.
He's being very serious when he says as long as it's not being spent on drugs and alcohol. He's thought a ton about how he's going to pass along his wealth.
We got them in all these live-in trust and regular trust. So it's going to go down through generations, and we call it generation skipping. So it goes through our generations of our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids. So do I have the philosophy, a lot of them say, I'm not giving it to my kids. They need to work hard and get it, and they're not getting out of it. Well, I worked real hard for it. So they get it over time, and they don't get it all at once. They get it when they turn a certain age, they get it, and then they get it over the next 40 years. And then if they die, it goes to their kids, and it's over time. So it's all set up in a time release. So they're wealthy, but they're not stupid wealthy. And 2, they have to get drug tests every year to get the release. And it's a hair drug test. So if they don't pass it through the banks, you don't pass a hair drug test, then you don't get that. So,
what's an example? If you fail a drug test, how much money are they going to be missing out on?
Well, they're all different because some of them was real young when they got the stock, and some are older. The later you was born, your stock hasn't matured enough because they're only 8 years old, and they got to wait another 17 years 25 before it starts vesting. So what's the stock going to be at 17 years from now? And the other one started years ago that is already vested, and they've went through the big upside. So all the grandkids and everybody, it's different. Nobody's treated equal. It's when you was born, when you got the stock, and that's where it went up.
Now, earlier, I teased that Oscar's portfolio was a bit surprising considering how much he's worth. There's always advice to diversify, and realistically, that's probably great advice for most people. Now, Oscar's situation, he's not normal at all. I mean, he's an extreme success, which means that he actually didn't follow a lot of traditional or smart advice, and it worked out wonderfully for him. Hang on a sec for that.
How is your portfolio broken down?
Just my own company. I have control over it. Although I'm retired, I'm still chairman of the board. I kind of pretty much I read, because the internet now, you can see everything. I can see everything every day, and I'm real tight with all of our upper management. So I kind of watch what it does, and I don't have to invest in other companies. I got a lot of all my net worth is in it. But
All of it.
all of it. Maybe 50 million is somewhere else, but that's a minor part of
What's the
mine.
50 million in?
Other public companies that's solid like mine.
That you personally picked, or that are kind of more index
I
funds?
personally pick, and I just bought them years ago, and they're way worth what I bought them for. I just bought them to put some money there, and they've done really good, but they'll never compete with my company because we've grown so much.
So when you have $3 billion, you got to think about that money's going to last for a long time.
Yeah, we'll never spend it. We don't. It's kind of like Warren Buffett said, he doesn't pay taxes. Well, I don't. I pay taxes on the interest. We got enough cash in the bank that's drawing 5% interest today. Well, I got to pay tax on that, but I'll probably never sell no more stock because I don't need it. I just don't need it.
So what do you do with it then? You hand it.
It just sets and draws interest, whatever the government's paying in treasuries, and it just grows and grows and grows. But our stock keeps growing up too. So I got 53 million shares. So when it goes up $1, I make 53 million bucks. So that's pretty big numbers. But when it goes down $1, I lose 53 million. But over time, the stock goes up and up and up and up because we're part of the economic industry in America in the commodities that we're in. It can't go away. It's part of life. It's like you can't take food away. You can't take mine away.
Do you have any idea what the monthly spend turns out to be?
My monthly spend?
Yes, personally.
We don't owe nothing on nothing other than what it costs to keep the airplane running and the cattle. Monthly, I would say yearly is probably more like 6-7 million a year.
Mm-hmm. For people who are newly wealthy, are there any mistakes that you see them commonly make that kind of make you cringe?
I see it all the time. It's terrible. They went into an industry and they made a lot of money. And all of a sudden they think they're a genius in every industry. They're not. People aren't. That's what we get from Wall Street. You see it, investment bankers, they go in, they're taught by a professor at a college. He's teaching college, teaching you how to make money, but he's a teacher in college. Why didn't he go out in the market and him be it? But he's teaching them. And what they're taught is if you can run a supermarket, then you can run a hotel, or you can run a digital company, or you can run they're all the same, and it's not the same. If you're smart in one industry doesn't mean you're smart in everything. You're smart in what you are trained at. And the mistake they do is they made a lot of money in something, then they get out and said, I want to own a bunch of land. I want to own commercial land. Well, commercial land is a good investment if that's all you do. But you got to remember, commercial land every 10 years takes a dump. Houses and everything has a trouble. Owning commercial land is really good in good times. But when things get tough, the people in them buildings, they go broke. Now you got a gigantic warehouse sitting empty that you got to maintain and you got to pay property tax on them. I've watched it over and over and over, and they took a lot of money to make less. Stay in the business that you're good at, or get the heck out of it and invest in companies that you know. But just because they talk on Wall Street, oh, this is a very good company and it's got all this growth and everything, that's well and fine. But there's a lot of good companies out there. It's been there for many, many years. But you got to really watch what you invest in. So I've seen them make these bad decisions and take a lot of cash that they'd earn instead of being safe and getting 4 or 5% interest on it. They'll invest it, and then they lose their ever-loving butt because somebody said, oh, that's a new ideal, and I'll put a lot of money in it. And then the stock takes a dump. And Warren Buffett has pretty much proved you buy and you set for a long time, but you buy good companies and just forget about it.
Have patience.
Have patience. The companies I have are stable companies, part of America. It's going to take a really bad CEO to bring them down. And if I see they get a bad CEO, then I'll just cash out and put in something else.
Goodbye.
But it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money for my net worth.
I want to end here. So imagine you're just coming back from your tour in Vietnam, knowing everything you know now. What advice would you give to that younger self?
Well, I think if you come back, you got to figure out what you want to end up in life. A 20-year-old man doesn't really know. A 20-year-old woman a lot of times knows what they want. A man really doesn't know where he wants to do till he's 27 to 30 years old. Then they make their major decisions. So when you're 20 years old and you get out of the service, you got to figure out what kind of job you like, what you really want to do, what do you want to get out of life. If you want to work for somebody, then that's terrific. The difference in working for somebody is you're working for a salary and you're happy. Working for yourself, it's the long game. You're going to put a lot of time and effort when you start. Later on, all that ownership comes back. Now you own it all. As long as you don't keep it into debt. I never had debt. Just grow, and don't go out and buy a brand new Ferrari, brand new Mercedes when you're just getting on your feet. Still drive that Chevrolet or Ford and buy a brand new forklift or a brand new truck or a brand new something that makes you money. Don't give it to yourself. You'll have plenty of time down the road when you're in your 40s that you can start cashing out and you got a cash cow making you money.
I swear you're the gold I've been running for. On it like I woke up and won the top, bro.
Before we wrap up, I've got to give an amazing shout out to Andrew Namami. He hosts this podcast called Permission to Shine, and I asked him to go find a billionaire to interview, and he did it. It was great. I loved hearing Oscar's story. The reason I love this story is because I hang out with a lot of Silicon Valley, New York types, and a lot of time they come off like they want to be sophisticated, or I don't know, they come off a little bit more polished than Oscar. But I love these stories. I like these stories of people who it kind of feels like they're winging it, and it kind of feels like they're out there just feeling the energy. And I love that. I think that there's a lot of ways to be successful. I think that planning things out, I think saving the world and having this mission-driven company, I think that's great. But I also think that sometimes just doing what feels good and having a blast doing it and treating the people around you, like your employees and your family and your team, treating them wonderfully, I think that is just a good enough reason to get into business. I think it could be that simple. I also respect how he's been at it for this long, and I love how he treats his wife. I'm talking stories of people in the South or people in the Midwest, farmers, people you may not read about in like TechCrunch or Business Insider or like some of the popular stuff out there. If you have any of these cool stories about billionaires, about wealthy people, I would love to talk about them, because I think that these stories where these guys kind of have this like, oh shucks attitude, I love that attitude, and I want to highlight some of those stories. So email me. My email is samparr@samparr.com. And of course, we're going to be back next week and the week after and a bunch of weeks after that to give you more of these episodes. But if you are a business owner, if you run a company, if you're the CEO of a company, please check out my company, Hampton. It's joinhampton.com. That's the URL. The way it works is people apply, and you have to be the CEO of a digital-based company. Our average company does something like 30 or 40 million in revenue. And when you join, we team you up with a group of 8 people, and you meet with them in real life oftentimes to discuss each month the things that are going on in your life, in your business. It's just a really easy way to have a confidential conversation about topics that you can't have anywhere else with people who are in similar situations as you. So check it out, joinhampton.com. And also, I have to give a shout out to Lower Street. They're the production company that makes this podcast. They have this new thing called Authority by Lower Street, and it's basically made it incredibly easy to have a podcast exactly like this one. It's meant for busy founders and business leaders and things like that. You can check them out, lowerstreet.co/authority. All right, that's Moneywise. That's the pod. I'll talk to you guys soon. You can hit me up on Twitter, the Sam Parr. Let me know what you thought about this episode. And also Andrew Namami, Permission to Shine. Check out his work. And we are incredibly grateful that he went and got this interview.